Hi, I'm Dr. Mike Hutchinson. Today I want to share some exciting news with you about stem cells and osteoarthritis. But let me start with the osteoarthritis. What is it? How do we get it? Well, it's the wear and tear in our joints. We start when we're young, we go through this programmed cell death. We start with great cells, and as we get older, we degenerate, and we end up with this degenerative joint disease. Our joints wear out, and then it can cause pain and inflammation. So what's done for that? Well, worldwide, the market is dominated by painkillers. Things like nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, aspirin, ibuprofen, Aleve or naproxen, or maybe an analgesic like Tylenol or acetaminophen. And when that doesn't work, you go to the doctor, and the doctor will then maybe give you an injection of hyaluronic acid, maybe some rooster collagen, which is to try to cushion the joint. And if that doesn't work, maybe a corticosteroid. And guess what happens when that doesn't work? Then we end up at that place where they say, look, you're going to need a joint replacement. Need to chop off the bone and put a new joint in. Whether it's metal, whether it's Teflon, it kind of is not a happy ending, is it? So now we go into stem cells. Nobody talks about that. Nobody's attacking the biologic process, the root cause of this degeneration that's occurring. But stem cells, now let me wipe out your fear about embryonic stem cells. We're not talking about embryos. We're talking about adult stem cells. We're talking about stem cells we get from our own body. So the main sources of those stem cells that we're going to talk about are bone marrow and fat. You've heard about bone marrow transplants from the 60s for leukemia patients. That's when they take a donor, they match them precisely, and then give them to the poor victim with a leukemia to try to give them new bone marrow supply and get rid of the leukemia. And if they match them precisely, it's successful. If they don't, the recipient will reject those new cells. Unfortunately, when you reject those cells, you end up in a situation where your body can really go awry and death could ensue. So that's very serious. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about autologous stem cells that we take from us, take from either our own bone marrow or our own fat. Now, what would I do? I get asked this all the time. I'm privileged. I've treated over 1,000 animals with stem cells, and I chose fat. And why did I choose fat over bone marrow? Well, bone marrow, when you're born, say you take a cup of bone marrow from your body, that's not an easy thing to do, but say you take a cup of bone marrow, you might have a million stem cells that we call MSCs, mesenchymal stem cells. MSCs are king of the hill. 99.9% of all research has been done on MSCs over the past few decades. So those are the cells that we're really interested in. And if you take a cup of bone marrow from you when you're 8 years old, you might have a million MSCs in that cup. But when you turn 50, 60, 70, 80, you might have 100,000 or 200,000. They decline with age, unfortunately. Well, let's turn to fat. If we take a cup of fat when you're 8 years old, you might have 500 million. But when you get 50, 60, 70, you have less, just like with the bone marrow, but you still have 100 million, 150 million. How neat is that? So that's why I chose fat. First of all, it's not that painful. It's easy to get with a mini liposuction, and people too. And then you end up in a situation where you have all of these good stem cells. You separate away the fat. So you now have this soup of cells that contain the stem cells, the MSCs that we want, but they contain an entire buffet of growth factors and immune cells and other cells that work together. They communicate with each other. Those cells are called the stromal vascular fraction. When that's injected into a damaged joint, they start communicating with the damaged cells in the joint. We call that the paracrine effect. That's when cell to cells communicate with each other and they start to orchestrate repair. They reduce inflammation. They clean up some of the debridement, or they debride that joint, clean up some of the damage that's been done, and hopefully they'll start to repair that cartilage. So what do we get? We get increased mobility and less pain because the inflammation has been reduced. That's great because we can maybe wean ourselves off those painkillers. Then we get the degenerative process that occurs with aging slowed down, maybe even stop for a while, but at least slow down. And hopefully we start to repair and grow new cartilage, our own native cartilage. Now, wouldn't that be a choice that you would like to have? So where does the FDA stand on this? Well, unfortunately, they're lagging behind the rest of the world. The Japanese citizens now can get this stem cell treatment. It's approved in their country. Great Britain is close to approval. And in the United States, we're lagging behind. But the FDA is making a very serious effort, and with bipartisan support in Congress, believe it or not, to get this approved for autologous therapies that come from our own body and go back into our own body. So our immune system does not reject it because there are repair cells. If you want to learn about these procedures that are being done in clinical trials here in the United States, go to my website, drmikehutchinson.com, D-R-M-I-K-E Hutchinson.com, and we'll give you links where you can go and read about this and see if you qualify or just get more information if you're interested. Thank you, and remember, don't just live and let live, but live and help live.